Hey, JR here from the FinOps Foundation. I am here with James from AWS at FinOps X 2024 to talk a little bit about where things are going in the future of FinOps. But before we do that, curious, what's been the most surprising thing for you in conversations here at the conference so far?
It's the thing that stands out for me is the passion, and it really is a group of like-minded individuals, many of whom I think don't get a chance to talk about these topics in the depth and to the extent that they do, when they get together like this, and it's been awesome to see, and there have been some really great conversations.
There is a lot of nerding out on FinOps that happens here at deep levels. Yes, indeed. So let's start kind of at the top, which is customer needs. I know there's a customer obsession thing that happens where you work, and I'd love to hear from your thought. Like, what are the primary customer needs you're hearing right now? From your customers that are really sort of driving and evolving their FinOps and affecting your roadmaps around this. What are the themes?
Yeah, I mean the kind of the theme that cuts across all of what I hear from customers is data. There's a huge degree of thirst for finer grained data, faster data, being able to break things out and really dig into and understand where cost drivers are coming from, and kind of answer the why. And so a ton of our conversations with customers, especially customers who are a little bit further along on the FinOps journey, is about how do I get more data, how do I get it more quickly, and how do I get it at a finer granularity, and how do I get additional data beyond just the data that we make available today. So more data sets is kind of a common theme, and then once they get their hands on that data, help using that data, help consuming that data, help digging through it, because it's often voluminous. There's a ton of it out there, and it's almost a little bit of a regret asking for it when they get it, and then we help them kind of work through that. So that's a common theme. Yeah.
So you said more data, more granular data, more types of data.
Yeah.
So I know Amazon's been cranking out billing data for almost a decade now in AWS.
Yeah.
So beyond where it is now, what do you see people wanting it to do next?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the data focus to date has been on kind of what I consider cost and usage data. So it's the line item data, it's the inputs, it's how that translates into costs, with, without discounts, those kinds of things. But there are additional tools that we've built up over the years that customers will want to be able to fold in via data into their workflows. So we're getting asks for richer data around recommendations that we make, around optimizations that we might identify. Sustainability is a big area where customers are asking for more data, finer grained data. So as they look beyond just how much did this thing cost me, they're starting to look at, okay, you're helping us make decisions, but we want you to give that data to us in a way that we can consume programmatically and plug into our own processes and our own tools on the back end.
So it's integration of all these different data sources for better decision making, which brings to, your team has been very involved in the last year on the Focus initiative, and you've had people in the contributors group, you've got someone on the steering committee, and I guess the elephant in the room question is, why are the clouds investing in this given it doesn't really directly drive revenue?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very simple answer, which is our customers want this. And customer obsession is front and center at AWS, and it's because we think that's a really good, sustainable, long-term business strategy. We're not customer obsessed because out of some deep-rooted sense of altruism or doing right by people. We're customer obsessed because we believe if we do right by our customers, they're going to keep coming back, and they're going to trust us.
Yep.
And so I don't think of investments like these as not being revenue generating, because the honest answer is, if you take the long view, they are revenue generating. If we give our customers things that help them operate more effectively, more efficiently, use their budget as effectively as possible, then they're going to feel more confident bringing the next round of budget and future spend and other workloads to the cloud. So it is at its core fundamentally revenue generating.
Yeah, the whole repatriation conversation I think always comes in when somebody's like, I'm not getting enough value, and if they feel like they're getting enough value and they can see that, then they're going to stay in there.
That is exactly it. And that goes right back to our kind of core DNA. I think one of the things we realized very early on when we were a bookseller and nothing more was, we were asking people to give us credit cards on the internet at a time when that was a scary thing to do. And for customers to be comfortable doing that, they
My
have to
mother-in-law
trust
still
us.
won't do it. She's
So,
afraid to do it.
and I was a holdout for a long time, but when you build that trust relationship with the company that you're handing that credit card over to, you're just much more comfortable doing it, and then it's just easier to buy that next book or toy or whatever it is that you prime ship to yourself the day after.
So, over 20 years ago, Amazon instituted the 2 pizza team rule, and I think that's an interesting foray into the question I want to ask you, which is, how are you seeing the architecting for cloud conversation get earlier on into engineering conversations, more agile approaches to that? Because that's not to use the overused expression, but the shift left is the ideal here. But are you seeing that in reality? And I guess, how are you seeing customers make it happen via process or incentives or anything else?
Yeah, so I think about this, very much as crawl, walk, run, shift left. I'm not a huge fan of the term shift left because it's one of those terms that's kind of lost some of its meaning. But it really is.
I hate. I don't want to use, but it keeps coming in.
It keeps coming up. And really for me, I just view it as it's a culture shift. What you're doing is the end state is one where engineering, science, whatever teams are building, product solutions, are factoring cost into that in the same way that they're thinking about what are my performance targets, what's the availability design goal here, what's my durability design goal here if I'm storing data, those kinds of things. And I think the way that you get there is you start. We're very big on mechanisms, which is a term that very simply means measure something and create a closed loop process. This is core to how Amazon operates, and the way that I think we're going to drive this journey is you start by building mechanisms, and a mechanism in this case is very simply surface the costs, inspect the costs, which means sit down as a group and look at them. And dig into, are they reasonable? Do they make sense? Do we understand what's driving them? And what will happen over time is, if you get that right, then you plant the seed where teams will want that earlier on, and then it will flip from trying to push that left to racing to give people the tools and the data that they need so that they can know that earlier on, so that by the time we're getting to that inspection phase. We're not finding any surprises, and so the crawl phase is just starting to collect the data. The walk phase is surface that data and inspect it as a group, and sometimes those are going to be uncomfortable inspections because it's like, wow, we're just bleeding money over here, and then the run phase is where the teams that are making those decisions are asking for the ability to do things like what if analysis, forecasting, planning up front so that they know what kind of cost targets they're aiming for, and then they can measure themselves against that when things land. And at that point, you've kind of won. But I think one of the dangers might overstate it. But one of the dangers that I see here is I see folks trying to skip the walk phase and jump straight to the run phase. And I just don't see that being successful. And that's playing out within our own teams. This is something that we worry about all the same things for our business. We're on the same FinOps journey that many of our customers are, and we're going through exactly that crawl, walk, run. And different parts of the business are more or less mature or further along in that journey.
It's a good point. I think of Gall's law, like the complex systems start as simple systems, and we talk here at the conference. We're saying there are no runners because it's not about building the most complex, fleshed out, advanced thing. It's about tightening the feedback loops that exist in the organization, so you can go quickly inform, optimize, operate, and figure out where you make small improvements, not huge ones that over time add up to a lot of change. But I think the key thing is obviously building the muscle, not so much like getting there initially. So I think glad to hear you talking about that. So. When we talk about focus in the billing data, one of the things that's most interesting for me is the idea that it can hopefully start to unlock bigger business conversations. You've been at Amazon for, I think, almost 20 years?
Almost 20 years,
yeah. So you've been through all types of technology spend and advancements there. Like, where do you see the holes in the bigger technology value conversation that unified language could hopefully in the future help with, whether on clear definitions of unit economics or anything else?
I mean, there are a couple of holes. Some of the obvious holes are just coverage. Just being able to to get to the same level of granularity across all of the different diverse kinds of spend that you see, even just within the cloud. The portfolio across all the cloud providers has expanded rapidly, and customers have no end of things that they want us to go and build for them.
I think Amazon has something like 250,000 individual SKUs, don't you? Like separate products.
Easily.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, just in AWS.
It's actually bigger than that.
Okay.
Probably by a couple of factors. It's actually it's terrifying diversity, but it's also like that's an enormous challenge. Just understanding all of those different costs and which ones to worry about. But then even the tools that we have available today, things like Compute Optimizer, like that's in this constant race to keep up with coverage, across all of the different services and capabilities that we're making available, and that shows up in the data sets that we're providing as well. And then increasingly, customers have started to look beyond the cloud, and they're like, well, this is awesome. I'm starting to get good traction. I have this really awesome tight feedback loop where I can get good data and I can make decisions and I can understand and see that they take me in the direction that I hope. And then I've got all this other stuff, whether it's another third-party provider or on-premise server in a closet somewhere, and I want the same things there. And so so I think I'm starting to think about like how do we unify some of that data, some of the structure, some of the content. I think is going to be super important. And my kind of favorite sort of why example for focus is a customer that I talked to a couple of months ago, where they're actually a big AWS customer, happy consumers of the current data sets that we provide, and so for them, it wasn't immediately obvious to me, like would they even use a focus data set given that they'd already done a bunch of work to integrate with some existing data sets, and so I was trying to understand. What are they trying to get? And one of the things they said was, once Focus is a blessed standard and supported by the big cloud providers, that gives them leverage to go to the small vendor and say, I want data from you, and I want it in a structured format. And if you don't know what to do, here's a standard.
And frankly, I talked to a lot of the smaller cloud-like providers who have now large spend, and a lot of them are trying to figure out what type of billing data they should put out. They're starting the journey that you and the other clouds have been on for years, and I think they're looking for some guidance. Like, how do I get the data in the right specification, granularity, and format so I can help my customers prove value?
That is
it's where you were 10 years ago.
Yeah, and it's so I think it's going to scoop the whole industry together, and industry is a very broad term there, deliberately, and going to help everybody start to make sense of some of that costs.
So let's talk about the big one, Gen AI and all the things. So. Two parts of this question. Where do you think the actual promise is there beyond the marketing hype and the Kool-Aid and all the things? And then on the other side of it, how do you see you and your peer clouds helping to enable customers make sure they're getting value out of all the spend that they're putting into transforming their business with AI?
The second part of that is kind of the easiest one for me, because I think it's easy. In all the hype and kind of with the pace at which that part of the industry is moving at the moment, to think that it's something new and different, and it really isn't. At the end of the day, it's another way to get things done and spend money doing so, and you want to get those two things in balance and in tension. And so all of the muscle, all of the tools, all of the maturity that's slowly been accumulating in this part of our industry in the FinOps space over the last few years, are equally applicable, to AI workloads, and I see a lot of conversations where it's almost like people are forgetting that and thinking they have to go and invent something new.
Reinvent the wheel. Yeah, it's another type of technology spend.
You've got the muscle. You just double down on that. I think in terms of helping our customers do that, the easiest way for us to do that is to make sure that they're getting rich data. That helps them, understand that part of their spend, in the same way that we've invested in doing that across, the rest of our portfolio. So that one's, in some sense, pretty straightforward, in my mind at least. I think the question of where and how is Gen AI gonna help, where are the promises? Where will it live up to the hype? I'm very pragmatic. I look at a lot of things, maybe even borderline skeptical. I look at a lot of things, and try to make sure that I understand what we're really going to get. And I see a ton of promise in Gen AI. I see a lot of hype around Gen AI, and I think I think one of the mistakes that I think folks are going to make is they're going to fall into the trap of trying to apply Gen AI everywhere, and miss out on opportunities where it is actually an awesome tool, because it is an awesome tool. It has some incredible promises. And so the way that I approach that with any technology like this is I spend a lot of time making sure that I understand what its strengths are, like what it's really good at. And for Gen AI, I look for at least two things that I think are its standout strengths. One is it's very good at extracting structure from unstructured data.
Yes.
And so anytime you're finding yourself wrestling with unstructured data, and unstructured could also be collections of lots of differently structured data, which are functionally equivalent to unstructured if they share no common structure. And then the other one is connecting dots across vast domains. It's very good at that as well. And so to the extent that you can find problems that look like they have attributes that map onto that, it's often a good place to start. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be open to interesting ideas for applying it in a bunch of places. But I do see a lot of what I tell my teams I think of as Gen AI pixie dust, where it's like, I got a problem, I'm going to sprinkle some Gen AI pixie dust on it.
It's a hammer,
and it's going to get better. And it might, but it might also cost you a lot. So for me, getting really targeted about thinking about where it's a good tool, is super important. And I think one of the obvious places is, answering the kind of the fundamental question of, wait, why is my bill so high? Or I don't understand this part of my invoice. Like those are at their core big unstructured data sets, unstructured problem spaces, and why questions are often about connecting dots. And so if you find yourself asking a question that starts with why, and you're dealing with a data set that's loosely structured or completely unstructured, that might be a sign that Gen AI is.
How do you counteract that thing that we've discussed about some of that data coming back being imprecise, especially when you're dealing with financial data like that?
We wrestle with this a lot. We think about this pretty deeply because one of the big challenges with Gen AI is it's not particularly good at doing arithmetic, and it turns out arithmetic is pretty important when you're dealing with costs.
Yes.
And so the way that we've approached that, and I think this is a pattern that you'll see repeat, is we will use generative AI to generate a structured form of the question, and then the question itself will be handed off to a structured API. And so, very simply, think of Gen AI as taking your question and turning it into what set of API calls would I make, or what set of data queries would I make to answer this question?
Yeah.
And then if it hallucinates a part of that, it doesn't matter, because the API will fail, the query will fail. You're not asking it to do any of the arithmetic. You're not asking it to answer the precise questions. You're asking it to take your unstructured question and turn it into a structured question. And I think that's going to end up being a very powerful pattern in this space, and maybe more broadly.
That's sort of, I'm thinking of the Pareto principle application here. It's like you got to figure out which of those 20% applications of AI are going to get most benefit, and don't spend money on the things you don't need with existing processes or tooling.
Or if you're going to spend money, just make sure that you know that you're spending money. That's one of the kind of surprising things that I've seen is I've seen a lot of kind of ad hoc applications of generative AI, and it's not obvious to me how we're thinking about the value proposition of that. And I think the fastest way to flush out the question of how valuable is this to me is to show me what it's costing me.
Yeah.
Because that immediately gets me thinking, is this worth it?
I had a conversation with somebody here who was saying that they've got really tight controls and restricting cloud budgets generally from the top down, but they are weapons free on cloud Gen AI uses for everybody to use. And they're saying it's actually in a good way over time becoming a gateway drug to more FinOps, because they're going, oh, we need to apply these principles here. Oh, we can do that. Where else can we do it? So just to wrap a bit, next year when we come back to FinOps X 2025, what do you think will be the top topics, the takeaways? Where do you think things go in the next year?
That's a good question. I'm hoping that the conversations that we're having a year from now are much more centered on teams at the front line and how we're helping them make decisions. And concretely, I think that will take the form of, are we giving them the right data? Mm-hmm. Is it scoped in a way that maps onto the things that they're responsible for? Today it's very easy to get, data in, all of its glory, but kind of across your entire company spend, which doesn't help a team sitting in the corner here is trying to figure out, what are my costs? I think the other big one is going to be, I've heard the term, what if come up. I've heard the term forecasting come up. They're all kind of similar takes on sort of the same core problem, which is being able to think proactively about what is this likely to cost me? Is that okay? And then build a plan around that. Because it turns out a very powerful mechanism that we leverage, pretty commonly is to build a plan, and then to just benchmark yourself against that plan. Because it's just a way to check, like, are we on course?
Yep.
And so I'm hoping that a year from now, we're talking about how the tools that we have in that space are inadequate and need more and need more enrichment. And the conversation itself has kind of shifted left.
So innovate and experiment, but with the mechanism and a two-way door that you can go back through if you need to change it.
Exactly. And we're focused on the frontline teams, because today we're still in the mode of just trying to get the frontline teams properly engaged and thinking about this.
Yes.
And I hope a year from now, they're engaged to the extent that they're banging down my door and asking for things, as much as this group is.
Good.
Yeah.
James, great to have you here. Thanks so
awesome
much.
to be here.
Looking forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you.